Teachers have read it. What is your "this student is so smart, it's scary" story? Story 1. Had a first grader figure out exponents on his own. Also to note, the kid knew numbers, but we had to read the directions to him because he couldn't read well enough yet. When I volunteered with my daughter's 5th grade gifted and talented class, there was this extremely bright young man. During free time, he would work on chemistry equations and worksheets the teacher printed out for him. I only realized what he was doing because he called me over to read the directions to him. Turns out he was severely dyslexic and just started reading independently that year, but still got stuck sometimes and needed help. Not all gifted kids have disabilities, but there's a surprising overlap. I learned that more than half of the gifted class had a diagnosed disability, including dyslexia, Asperger's or autism, ADHD, etc. The teacher explained that gifted kids tend to be atypical in development, so it makes sense that they would have some deficiencies even when they prove to be extremely smart. I'm not suggesting that kid had a reading disability. Not being able to read by 1st grade is normal, but it reminded me of how surprised I was when the smartest kid in the room couldn't read. My daughter is still good friends with him, and they're on the robotics team together and both are taking honors chemistry next year. His reading has improved, but it's still slow and he'll pass something over to my daughter or a good friend to read if they're in a time crunch. My daughter figured out 7 and 3 times tables on her own in kindergarten when I took her and her brother to a football game. But she admits she doesn't hold a candle to the kid who will pass her a fortune cookie to read when they have lunch off campus. Amazing how a lot of kids are way more ahead than others. My mom taught me stuff before I learned them in school. I was a genius for the first week because I ended up forgetting everything after. Story 2. I taught high school math. One of my freshman students divided 1,134 by 63 in his head in less than a second. I let him finish the problem. And then after he arrived at his answer, I asked him, "How did you do that?" He looked at me with this blank stare as if he was thinking, "You can't do that?" He proceeded to say, "Well, I doubled 63 and then multiplied that by 10. And then I saw that 1,134 was just the difference of those two numbers, so 18. Looked at me like it was nothing. I told him good work and moved on. I'm only above average at a few things, but one of them is mental math. When I saw that this kid could do this calculation that I couldn't, I was so happy. It was one of my happiest moments as a teacher. I didn't help him in that moment, but to know I played a small part in his math education felt so good. Doing math honestly makes my brain feel weird, like getting stuck in quicksand or something. I do it the exact same way, but nowhere near as fast. So that's still a win, right? Story 3. We had a 4-year-old in preschool. He was sitting under the table writing down numbers for a long time. He had no time to talk to us. When he came out and we looked at what he had been doing, he said he wrote down all the multiplications. It turns out his brother in 5th grade was learning the multiplication table, and this little brother really wanted to do the same, but did not have a multiplication table. He counted on his fingers to add each column and got the table right. A few days later, he knew multiplication. He would also comment on dates. If someone told him they had their birthday on June 12th, he would say, "That's in 184 days." Almost immediately. On an excursion, we passed some statues with birth and death dates, and he would casually sum up. "He was 78 years and 110 days old. She was born 33 years and 120 days before him," etc. I think he was maybe more focused and willing to understand than necessarily so smart. This kid is really the whole package. He's enthusiastic about everything. Gymnastics, science, art, math, not at all to compete, just because it is what he likes. Other kids just follow him and he's off in the center, and he's kind and nice. Never seen him push, hassle, or brag, just enjoys taking in all facets of life. I just wanted to show him I could see who he was. I treated him as an adult in conversations and feedback. He was of course childish in many ways, but behind the noise of childishness was a wise soul I wanted to know and encourage. Story 4. One of my kindergartners just knows multiplication, and not just the basic 5 or 10s. In the beginning, when his parents told me, I played along with 2 times 2 or 10 times 10, but you can tell him 17 times 14 and he knows it instantly. So cool to watch. Reminds me of my daughter when she was 3. My sister loves telling people she taught my daughter multiplication as a toddler. Really, she was distracting her in a store, and my daughter was counting by 2s. My sister said, "Can you do that with 3s?" My daughter thought about it and then just did it. They went through this all the way to 7s in 10 minutes. My sis told her it was called multiplication, and to this day takes credit for it. My daughter is currently in 6th grade, taking both Algebra 1 and Geometry. She isn't a genius or prodigy. She isn't doing so well in history, probably because, for example, instead of taking notes on the Haitian Revolution yesterday, she started writing all the exponents for 3. She was proud to show me she got all the way to 3 to the 50th. Some people just feel numbers and enjoy them more than other things. Whoa there. 6th grade? Wow, that makes me feel dumb. If I could remember it right, geometry was taught in 9th grade? You better watch over this kid. She might develop telekinesis.
Hey, also, if you didn't know yet, me and a couple of my friends just launched Rufus Rugs. Premium, custom, hand-tufted rugs. Maybe you're just a fan of Naruto and want to show it off. Or maybe you just love Pokemon and want buzz toys on display for everyone. Either way, we can make almost anything. So hit the first link in the description to learn more.
Story 5. I was doing a 500-piece puzzle with some kids. I was a preschool teacher. We finished the puzzle except for one piece, which was nowhere to be found. Kid comes in, takes one look at the puzzle on the table, says, "Oh, are you missing that? I know where it is." Reaches into another completely different 500-piece puzzle, rummages for like 10 seconds, pulls the piece out, fits it in. I asked him how he knew it was there. He said he had done the other puzzles for a bit and noticed it. I asked him how long ago. Christmas, he says. It was February at the time. Kid was maybe 5 at the time. Might be more memory than intelligence, but that was crazy to see. Such a great kid, in somewhat dire circumstances. I hope he's gotten all the opportunities he deserved. Story 6. Kid took the fat highlighters, cut them open and removed the insides and replaced it with sold them at school. He was caught, but only because a kid snitched after they were caught getting high. Absolutely brilliant. Highlighters. It's right there in the name. One's an ingredient, the other is the effect. Story 7. My fiancé has an eidetic memory, and I think that our daughter does too. He's gotten a phone call for work while in the shower before. He turned off the water and proceeded to have a conversation with a customer. I ran to get his paperwork from the day, and I heard him asking if she was addressed XYZ, and if this had been done and she confirmed it was her. He remembers the most minuscule details. He probably drives over 100 miles a day to at least 12 separate homes or buildings and does a dozen different things for each location. After 7 years at the job, you'd think you'd mix up a phone number or address when you're not looking at paperwork. Not him. Our daughter shows signs too. I took her to the doctor for her 1-year shots. They gave her 6. Obviously, it was a horrible experience. I went in to get my flu shot about 2 months after, and my daughter saw the same nurse and started pulling at me and telling me that we needed to leave. There's no way she should have remembered. She's too young. She's almost 2 now, but she knows probably 50 nursery rhymes. She speaks English mostly, but she knows a bit of Spanish and ASL too. She's like a sponge, absorbing information. When she hides a toy, she'll cry for me to look in a specific spot weeks later when I wouldn't think it'd be. But she just knows. It's pretty amazing. Story 8. Not a teacher, but a proud big brother. My baby sister was 5 when I came home from college for the summer after actually figuring out calculus, and I explained it to her, and she wrote it down in her journal. Yes, she kept on from the time she was about 4. Fast forward after she skipped a few grades in elementary school and she was taking calculus in high school. I could not understand why it was so easy, and reread her journal, figured it out, and called me, laughing. She has a PhD in high-energy physics and does research at CERN. Yeah, that stuff. Desperately proud of her. Story 9. I was a student teacher at the time, completing my education degree. I taught 8th grade. There was this one girl who was your typical edgy, angsty 13-year-old who was too cool for everything. When we went through our poetry unit, we gave a project in which the kids had to write their own freeform poem and put it to some sort of video or slideshow. This girl wrote a poem about how the United States education system stifles creativity and destroys students' joy of learning. I always remember this one line from her poem. I learned more from an evening watching Hamilton on stage than an entire year in a United States history class. The video is your typical angsty black and white shots of her friends standing solemnly in front of or behind chain link fences and signs that say, "No trespassing." The next day, she showed up with a gigantic biography of Alexander Hamilton. It was bigger than most Bibles. It only took her a week to read it. My mentor teacher hated her because she thought the student thought she was smarter than everyone else and was arrogant. Maybe she did think that. Maybe she thought we were annoying simpletons. But I just thought she was dope as heck. This kid didn't particularly like or dislike me, hated my mentor teacher, and disliked anyone except a couple friends. She was sassy. She was smart. She had a finely tuned BS meter. She had a huge vocabulary and an obvious love of learning. She'd grill out book after book. And where my mentor teacher saw arrogance in her poem project, I just saw a girl who was desperately bored and was asking for a challenge. I tried my best to give her extra, more challenging options in the future for her assignments. She never said anything to me, but I got the feeling she appreciated it. Or I hope she did. Aside from the talent and intelligence, she has a fine-tuned BS meter. Wow, this kid is going places for sure. Story 10. Not a teacher, but I knew as a father I was doomed when this incident happened to me. My oldest daughter is 18 now and preparing for college. When she was young, we worked with a talent agency to get her into acting and modeling. She went to NYC, etc., and was moderately successful at what she was doing. Nothing that made money, but it was a good experience all around. One day I was in my bedroom with her mother. We heard her daughter crying. We look over at her. She's standing in front of a full-length mirror and crying her eyes out. I look at her mother, and her mother looks at me like, "What is this happening? Did you say something or do something?" Nope, neither of us did anything. So we stood in silence for a moment and watched our daughter, who had no idea we were watching her. Eventually we stopped her. "Honey, what's wrong?" "Nothing, Mommy, I'm practicing crying." It was at that moment I realized that my daughter was clearly not cut from the same cloth as her mother and I. 16 years later, she's going to college with a full scholarship, when neither myself or her mother got through college. Kid was smart, driven, and determined. All the things I wasn't. I was drunk and chasing women at that age. Ha! 18 years old is the time for experimenting. I did a lot of those. If I didn't, I'd probably be in the lab discovering a cure for cancer or something. So if you're smart like these kids, you better hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Back to the video. Story 11. Not exactly what's being asked, but it sort of fits. I was the student. I could do 3-digit by 3-digit multiplication in my head in 5th grade, so I did it in my homework without showing any work. My teacher, in front of the whole class, insisted that I cheated and they must have used a calculator. I was a rule follower and really cared about my schoolwork, so this devastated me. I told my parents and they contacted her, and she was incredibly rude and told them that I'd be a child prodigy if I could do that, and insisted that I was cheating. My parents said they have never seen me using a calculator, and she replied with, "Do you watch her every second?" Despite her insisting, my parents believed me and tested me by giving me random multiplication problems, all of which I was able to do, and chewed the teacher out. She apologized but still forced me to show my work from then on. I can only assume she felt threatened that a student was better at mental math than her. I agree with you. Some teachers are so threatened by the thought that their student is better than them. Love how he just devoured her soul by proving her wrong. Story 12. I teach gifted and talented 1st and 2nd graders. I have a lot of very smart students over the years, some with an amazing sense where they can understand most math concepts before I teach it. For example, they see the connections between multiplication and equivalent fractions and immediately can simplify or find great common factors. Several read at the high school level but maybe don't really get the social context of what they're reading. Usually I can maintain some control in the classroom because they are 7 or 8, and I'm an adult and have been teaching kids like them for years. This year, I have one little girl who writes beautifully. She's very talented, but that's all she wants to do. While I enjoy talking with her about her craft and helping her think of a good transition for the scenes in her stories, these are the types of questions she has for me. I also have to teach her math, and teach the rest of the class too. Recently, she's been going through some challenging emotions. She gets angry at others, lashes out, and has been defiant with adults. So she was arguing with me about having to do math problems and equivalent fractions when she's already demonstrated mastery of this skill. I think she's heard me use this phrase in reference to her spelling. She's passed out of spelling. Honestly, she caught me off guard. So I said, fine, show me you can do these 3 problems and we'll call it good. So she did, and she got what she wanted. I realized later what she did. She's right. Really, if you can demonstrate mastery, you don't need more practice. So now she tries this with everything and every skill she doesn't particularly like. She is exhausting, but she's fun to mentally spare with. I have many students who are smarter than I am, but she's the first one to outmaneuver me. Story 13. I work with toddlers sometimes, and there's this girl that they moved up from the infant room at 14 months. We usually wait till around 18 plus months, because she was so far ahead of everyone else. She's 18 months now and she's fully potty trained, even wears underwear. She speaks perfectly clearly and you can have full-blown conversations with her. She knows all her letters, she can write her name, she can write her brother's name, she can count to 100 in English, Spanish, and ASL. She knows a ton of signs, not just the easy ones. She knows more than the teachers that are supposed to teach the kids ASL. She recognizes her emotions and will come up and say, "I'm not feeling very brave today," or "I'm feeling embarrassed." She can also sign to you what emotions she's feeling. When we do magnetic letters, she will tell you the letter and the color of the letter in English, Spanish, and ASL. Meanwhile, I know a 19-month-old that can only say mama, dada, and no. Kids are so diverse. Kids this smart are scary. Imagine seeing a 14-month-old baby and make funny faces just to make him or her laugh. Then the baby just gives you a full conversation of how rude you are making faces at him or her. Story 14. A kid's work kept deleting itself on a computer every few minutes. He was having a meltdown and I saw it happen. It was impossible to explain the phantom deleting that was going on. Fast forward to the end of the class and there's one kid remaining. That was sitting at the opposite computer from the kid who lost all his work. He looks at me and says, "You want to know what I did, sir?" He had put in a USB keyboard into the back of the computer and had it set up so he could hit the delete key with his big toe. It was the funniest stealth attack I'd seen in a long time. Being the teacher, I should have done something, but it was too funny and smart. That's hilarious. Things that go down at school are either crazy smart or just flat out dumb. A+ for the trolling though. Story 15. I'm an instructor at a massage school. The director has, for quite a long time, been in the twilight of his career. In other words, he's doing a piss-poor job where he used to be incredible. One of my jobs is to do an assessment of students where they massage me. I judge them subjectively and then give advice and correct mistakes. Most of the students need a ton of help after coming out of the director's class. People envy this part of the job, but really, a bad massage is worse than bad. I've been bruised, had my leg hairs tied into knots from repeated circular motions, had my private areas bumped into accidentally, not in the fun way or by someone desirable, been sweated on repeatedly by a nervous student, and often deal with ice-cold shaky hands due to very nervous students. Not fun. One lady gave an amazing massage while I failed several of her classmates, and these classes are not large. Her attention to detail was quite good, her pressure and flow were very nice, and her perceptiveness was on a much higher level than some green, poorly taught, unlicensed person. It is a bit hard to convey here the surprising quality of her work. Most people are robots. They'll do what they are taught and never learn to adapt mid-session. They treat the body as if it is a bunch of parts put together instead of a series of systems that affect and interact with each other. Look up a muscle chart and take note of how many things are named. So many muscles and so many tendons and ligaments. To understand how these things work together and give a massage that demonstrates that understanding is always impressive, regardless of experience level, this woman hadn't even done her internship yet. She was still 50+ hand-on hours away from the state requirement to get her license, but the scope of her massage was very good. Therapists and students have to ask many times if the pressure was right. Think about that. The level of pressure is one of the most fundamental traits of a successful massage. While clients are infinite in their variety, intuition and experience can come together with just a moderate amount of experience to make your pressure judgment pretty accurate. So when I meet therapists with more experience than myself who still do the standard, ask about pressure 3 times in the first 10 to 15 minutes, I want to scream. These people are not paying attention while they work. They aren't learning from their experience. They are just mechanically going through the motions till they get to clock out and go home. This woman had already had enough finesse to start at medium and increase while watching my reaction, and for the most part, level out an appropriate pressure. Once in a while, you find someone who's got years of experience who's learned the finesse and intricacy I'm talking about. They usually started off with a great education and natural talent. For those of you who get regular massages, you know the difference between a good one and a bad one. They can be doing remarkable similar motions with their hands or forearms, etc., and yet the sensation and effect are miles apart. I regularly trade massages with other therapists. Most of the time, they tell me they feel like they're getting the better end of the deal. Usually they have much less experience though. Not trying to brag. It's just that I got a great education, have years of experience, and have the benefit of having taught as well. Teaching a subject can really improve your command in both basic and subtle aspects. Occasionally, I find someone I like more than most, and I'll stick with them as long as our schedules continue to match up. I've only had a handful of massages in my life, better than her exam. I corrected a few things and asked if she'd like to trade some time. During the first 10 or so trades, she paid attention to what I did and learned more. She would try to mimic me, and if she didn't feel like she had it right, she'd flat out ask. I still trade with her, and there's no replacement. She's got maybe 2 years of experience at this point, to my 10. I don't ever have to stop and correct or modify what she does. If I went out of town and referred my clients to her, I'd be afraid I might lose some. She's technically skilled, a natural caretaker, and very perceptive to what's going on under her hands. I live in a big city with a very large population, and I've seen hundreds of therapists work. Cringed at most of them. I know there's always someone better. Getting cocky is a bad thing. It's unhealthy and stunts growth. But I don't know if I've ever met someone here who I felt could surely say, "Yep, that therapist is better than me." This lady has skills that make me feel a bit threatened. The only reason she ever has to ask me something is simple numbers. Having given thousands of massages, there are things I've encountered that she just hasn't. But it's very rare these days for her to have any questions. Give it a few years, and I might need to start paying her instead of trading. I always try to express my gratitude for her work, and I hope she stumbles across this post, so she really knows how good she is. If someone gets that many messages in the regular and claims that she's good, she must be the real deal. What's her number? If you made it this far, I hope you liked the video. And if you did, I know you'll enjoy Teachers have Read It. How easy is it to tell if a student has a crush on another? Story 3 was hilarious. See you on that video.